It began with a reel of film, discovered decades after it should have been forgotten. The footage was cracked, its images blurred by time. But what it contained was so horrifying that archivists debated whether it should ever have been preserved. A man, smiling, steadying a camera, with hands too calm, while his wife struggled, suffered, and faded before the lens. And what chilled those who viewed it was not her death alone, but the laughter, faint yet undeniable, of the man who watched. Hi everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit subscribe and tap the bell icon before this story pulls you in too deep. Because tonight, we step into a history no one was ever meant to know. The man in question was not a stranger to his community. He was respected, even admired, seen as a man of progress, in an age when cameras were still rare and treasured. His fascination with recording life had once seemed harmless. Weddings, birthdays, the ordinary scenes of family living. But somewhere along the line, his obsession turned darker. It was not enough to preserve smiles and celebrations. He wanted to capture suffering, to freeze it, to hold it, to watch it again and again. The woman, his wife, had been described in surviving accounts as gentle, patient, and strangely resigned. Friends remembered how she spoke less as the years went on, her laughter fading into silence, as though something within her was dimming. No one could have guessed how far her silence would be pushed, or how cruelly it would be recorded. The reel itself was discovered in an attic chest, mislabeled among boxes of film strips from community gatherings. When played, it revealed a scene no one should have seen. The wife, weakened, gasping, her body deteriorating under an illness never specified in records. And beside her, though just out of frame, his shadow moved, steady and deliberate, as the camera kept rolling. The footage never turned away. Most haunting of all was the sound. Faint, distorted by age. But there, the sound of a man chuckling, then laughing outright, as though death unfolding before his eyes was not tragedy, but entertainment. And it was this, his laughter, that haunted those who dared to view the film more than the image itself. What makes this story especially disturbing is how carefully the man hid his obsession. To the outside world, he remained respectable, a family man who owned one of the earliest cameras in his town. Neighbors even trusted him to document their weddings, their christenings, their proudest days. Yet behind closed doors, he was crafting an archive of cruelty, reels of pain, suffering, and slow decay. The discovery of his wife's final moments was only the most damning of many. Among the reels found in that chest, archivists described scenes that were never meant for public eyes. A cat, bound and trembling, filmed until its life faded out. An elderly relative, coughing violently while the camera lingered on her heaving chest. Children, though spared the worst, were captured in ways that suggested not love, but an unblinking study of exhaustion and fear. What tied each reel together was the same sound, his laughter. Always faint, always present, echoing just beneath the scratching hum of the film. The wife's reel, however, stood apart. It was not filmed in haste or secrecy, but with deliberate framing, as though he meant for it to be seen. He adjusted angles, shifted light, even paused and restarted the machine when the film jammed. He documented her decline with the precision of a man recording an experiment, not a husband witnessing the death of the woman he vowed to protect. And when she gasped her last breath, he did not comfort her. Instead, the reel captured a moment of stillness, followed by the unmistakable sound of laughter swelling into something joyous. No one knows if he ever showed the reel to others in his lifetime. But there are rumors, half buried in town records, that guests at his home sometimes spoke uneasily of evenings spent in his study, where he insisted on showing his films. Some claimed they left disturbed, unable to explain why the images unsettled them. Others never spoke of it again, as though silence was safer than remembering what they had seen. The strangest detail is this: no death certificate for his wife exists. Official records list her as missing. Whether he buried her in secret, destroyed the evidence, or rewrote the truth through silence, no one knows. But the film, hidden away, survived. And through it, so did his laughter. When word of the reel spread quietly among scholars and collectors, debate erupted. Was it genuine, or an elaborate fabrication meant to shock? Those who viewed it firsthand insisted it was real. Too raw, too unsparing to be staged. They spoke of details impossible to fake in that era. The fragile tremor of her hands, the shallow rise and fall of her chest, the flickering glaze of her eyes as breath deserted her. And always, his laughter, embedded like a scar in the celluloid. Historians searching through old archives found fragments of the man's life. He had been fascinated not only with cameras, but with the idea of capturing truth. In journals attributed to him, he wrote cryptic lines such as, "The lens never lies. It sees death as it is, without sentiment." Another chilling entry declared, "To film is to own, and what I own, I may keep forever." These words suggest he did not simply record life. He collected it, preserved it, even twisted it into possession. Neighbors, when interviewed decades later, remembered small things that now seemed sinister. His curtains always drawn, the faint hum of machinery late at night, his wife's slow decline, which they attributed at the time to illness, but which, in hindsight, felt orchestrated. A woman who once had vitality became little more than a shadow in the space of a year, and her husband never called for help. Instead, he positioned his camera. What unsettled researchers most was how deliberately the reel was hidden. It had been spliced into harmless community footage, buried among scenes of fairs, parades, and children playing. Whoever packed those reels wanted the wife's death to vanish into normality, as though folding horror into the ordinary would protect it from discovery. But film, like memory, has a way of surfacing when least expected. And so the question lingers: was this man documenting his wife's natural death, or was he orchestrating it? Did he withhold food, deny medicine, accelerate her suffering, all for the sake of capturing the moment when life slipped away? The reel does not answer. It only shows a man who, while his wife died, could not contain his laughter. The more researchers pieced together the fragments of his life, the darker the picture became. Official records revealed that he had once been affiliated with a photography club, a group of men fascinated by the power of early film. But unlike others, who captured landscapes or civic events, his contributions were always unsettling. Broken dolls arranged like corpses, children photographed mid-cry, and once, an image of his wife, standing unnaturally still, her eyes glassy, as though commanded to freeze. Members of the club eventually distanced themselves, whispering that his work carried a sickness. Yet he was clever. In public, he appeared ordinary, even generous. He donated to churches, attended town meetings, and shook hands with officials. His charm made it difficult for anyone to believe the rumors. But charm is often a mask, and behind his mask, his obsession deepened. Some speculated that the camera was not merely his tool, but his shield. a way to transform cruelty into art, to excuse suffering by framing it as truth. The strangest accounts came not from his peers, but from children who once visited his home. Decades later, grown old themselves, they spoke of a parlor where the walls were lined with reels and photographs. They described the wife sitting silently in a corner, her presence almost ghostly, while her husband adjusted lights and lenses, ignoring her frailty. One recalled how, when a child began to cry, the man did not comfort them. Instead, he raised his camera, smiling, and whispered, "Don't stop. It's real now." What unsettles historians is not just his cruelty, but the intention behind it. His journals hinted at a philosophy that to witness suffering was to own a piece of eternity. To capture death was not to fear it, but to dominate it. He wrote of the joy in replaying, words that feel unbearable when paired with the reel of his wife's death. When the attic chest was discovered, some reels had already decayed beyond recognition. What images were lost, what horrors melted into dust, no one will ever know. But the few that survived tell enough. A man who turned his wife's dying breath into spectacle and who laughed while the camera turned. As investigators sifted through his traces, a pattern began to emerge, not only in his films, but in the silences left behind. His wife's family had pressed for answers after her disappearance, but every letter they sent went unanswered. Eventually, they too fell silent, as though their grief had been locked away by shame. Town officials kept no record of her burial, no obituary, no official mourning. It was as if the woman had been erased, her existence reduced to a flicker of shadow on fragile celluloid. And still, he lived on for years, respected, never accused. This is perhaps the most disturbing part of the tale, that no one stopped him. People suspected, people whispered, but silence won. Silence always wins when horror is too great to face directly. Neighbors admitted much later that they sometimes heard her cries through the walls, thin and weak, cut short when the sound of the camera began to click. One even recalled the faint echo of his laughter drifting through the night air, and the way their stomach turned when it mingled with her sobbing. Yet none went to the door. None intervened. The footage itself offers no mercy. Those who dared to view it spoke of a detail almost unbearable. The way his wife, in her final moments, seemed to look directly into the lens. Her eyes wide, unfocused, but undeniably facing the camera, as though she knew that her suffering was being preserved. It is this stare, more than the laughter, that viewers said haunted them afterward. Not rage, not even despair, but a hollow, knowing gaze that seemed to pierce through time. Why did he film her? Was it madness, cruelty, or something more deliberate? An attempt to trap her death inside the reel so he could control it forever? His writings offer hints, but no answers. Laughter, he scrawled in one entry, is the only honest sound in the face of death. Words that reveal not just indifference, but delight. And yet, despite this evidence, his name never appeared in newspapers as a criminal. Instead, he faded into history as just another man with a hobby, his darkest reel hidden in the shadows of an attic. Until time, as it always does, uncovered what was meant to stay buried. By the time the reels were finally uncovered, the man himself had long since vanished into the grave, leaving only questions and fragments of his obsession behind. Yet those who handled the footage insisted his presence still lingered. Archivists described an unease that clung to the room whenever the projector whirred. Some spoke of hearing faint laughter, even when the reel had ended, echoing softly from the spools as they spun down. A few refused to touch the film again, swearing that it carried not just images, but something alive within it. What unsettles the imagination is how easily horror disguises itself as normalcy. To own a camera in those days was to be admired, to be seen as progressive, even visionary. No one questioned what he filmed or why, and so his cruelty was preserved not in rumor, but in frames of light and shadow, bound together with his own laughter. That reel, more than any record, became his confession. Folklore began to form around the discovery. Some said the wife's spirit remained inside the film, her eyes still searching, still pleading with every viewer who dared to watch. Others claimed the man's laughter could attach itself, following those who heard it, echoing in their own lives at the most unexpected moments, while eating, while lying in bed, while staring into mirrors. Stories circulated of researchers who grew paranoid, convinced they were being watched through the very lens of their own cameras. Historians debate whether these accounts are embellishments, but the impact of the reel is undeniable. To see a life taken, not with rage, but with amusement, erodes something fundamental in the human mind. It is not simply the act of cruelty, it is the joy in cruelty that makes the soul recoil. Even now, the reel is said to exist in private hands, its location hidden, guarded. Some insist it was destroyed out of mercy, burned to ash, so your face might finally rest. Others claim it still survives, traded quietly among collectors of forbidden histories, waiting for the next set of eyes to fall upon it. And if that is true, then perhaps somewhere, right now, someone is watching. And perhaps, just perhaps, they are laughing. As with all tales buried in the dust of forgotten years, there is no neat ending, only echoes that refuse to fade. The man who filmed his wife's final breaths was never punished, never judged by a court of law. Instead, he lived as so many monsters do, hidden in plain sight, smiling as the world mistook him for harmless. His crime, preserved in fragile reels of celluloid, was left to speak for him long after his bones had turned to dust. For those who have glimpsed even fragments of the reel, the experience becomes more than memory. It becomes possession. Some describe being unable to close their eyes without seeing her face, the way her hollow stare fixed itself upon the camera. Others say the laughter of the man begins to feel familiar, as if it comes not from the past, but from somewhere much closer. Perhaps the reel does not merely show death. It carries the weight of the moment itself, looping it endlessly across generations. The most disturbing question is not why he filmed it, nor why he laughed, but why we continue to seek stories like his. Perhaps because horror, when it hides in ordinary lives, is more terrifying than any legend. Perhaps because there is something within us that wants to stare back into the darkness, just as his wife stared into that unblinking lens, and find out if it stares back. In some archives, references to the reel appear briefly before vanishing, as if erased by unseen hands. Libraries that once cataloged the material now mark it as lost. Those who ask too many questions find themselves met with silence. It is as though the world itself conspires to bury the truth once more, just as it tried to bury her story in life. Yet, stories like these never truly die. They resurface, whispered in towns, stumbled upon in forgotten boxes, retold by voices that cannot rest. And now, you too carry it. You know of the man who laughed as he filmed, of the woman who died beneath his gaze, of the reel that refuses to fade. Perhaps tonight, when you are alone, you will wonder if somewhere in the darkness, a reel is still turning, and if laughter waits on the other side.